In this video, we're going to take a look at how you can start with a quadratic equation in standard form and convert it to vertex form by completing the square. In a previous video, I went over how to do this when the a value is always equal to 1, which is a little easier. In this video, we'll show how to do it no matter what the a value is. After I do this first problem, I'll go ahead and review and show the steps that we take to do this procedure. All right, so let's jump in and do this. So you have to notice that you have an a value of 2 on this, and we're going to take that a value of 2, we're going to divide it out of our first two terms. So we're going to end up with y equals 2 times, and then 2 times x squared gives you 2x squared, and then you got to think 2 times what will give you negative 16x? That would be negative 8x. I can put a plus sign and leave some space, and then my plus 35 goes on the outside. All right, next step is to go ahead and take what's in the parentheses and put it into a generic rectangle. We put our x squared here, and then remember we have to split the 8x into negative 4x, negative 4x. And then we can fill out the outside. This is x times x, and negative 4 times negative 4, which when we go negative 4 times negative 4, we get positive 16. That positive 16 can now go here. Now, when the a value is 1, you just put plus 16 on the inside and negative 16 on the outside. But you have to realize that this time we have an a value of 2. And so we're actually, when we put a plus 16 here, that a value of 2 is multiplying times the 16. So when you put a plus 16 there, the value that you've added to the equation is actually positive 32. So I need to put a minus 32 on the outside of my equation. Now we can just go ahead and simplify it to vertex form. So we end up with y equals 2, and then this is x minus 4 squared. And then the positive 32 and negative 32 becomes a plus 3. So our vertex would be the opposite of negative 4, and then the 3 on the outside. So we have a value of 2 and a vertex of 4, 3. Let's go ahead and look at this problem again, only this time we can take some notes on the steps that we took. So there's our problem that we just solved, and the first step that we did was we divided the a value out of the ax squared plus bx part, and then we put the c value outside the parentheses. So we're going to take the 2 out of 2x squared, and we're going to go 16x, negative 16x divided by 2. So that leaves us with 2 times the x squared minus 8x inside the parentheses, and the positive 35 is on the outside. The next step is to go ahead and use a generic rectangle to complete the square. Remember, the bx part, that negative 8x, is going to get split between the two diagonal squares. And then when we go negative 4 times negative 4, we get positive 16 in the last square. So the next step is to go ahead and take that positive 16, and it goes into the space for the missing number that's inside the parentheses. All right, step 4, we're going to go ahead and multiply this perfect square by the a value that's in front of the parentheses. So that would be the 2 times the 16. So 2 times 16 gives us positive 32. The opposite value goes on the outside of the parentheses. So the opposite of positive 32 would be negative 32. Our last step is to go ahead and simplify this now to vertex form. So our x squared minus 8x plus 16, that is simply x minus 4 squared, and the positive 35 and negative 32 becomes a positive 3. So if you want to, you can pause the video and go ahead and write down these notes. And if you're going to put this in your notebook, why don't you go ahead and fix the typo on step 5. That should say the opposite value goes outside the parentheses. Let's try another one. This time, you notice that the a value is actually a fraction, but the procedure is going to be exactly the same. So our first step is to go ahead and take the 1/3. We're dividing that out of 1/3 x squared, and then we're dividing it out of 4x. I think it's easier to think 1/3 of what number will give you 4. That would need to be a 12x. And then we have our space left over, and our positive 8 goes on the outside. All right, off to the side, we can go ahead and do our generic rectangle. We put our x squared here, and we got to split our 12x into positive 6x. Then we'll go ahead and get the outside, x by x, and this would be a plus 6 and a plus 6. Then we can go 6 times 6 to get 36. That 36 will fill in our missing space inside the parentheses. And now we got to counterbalance that. So remember, technically this 36 is multiplied by 1/3. So when you put a plus 36 in here, you're actually adding 12 because 1/3 of 36 is 12. So the opposite of plus 12 is minus 12. Next up, we can just simplify what we got. 1/3 times x plus 6 squared minus 4. So that fraction wasn't too bad. We just needed to think in terms of what number do we divide by 3 to get the 4x, and then we ended up remembering that it's 36 divided by 3 is 12, because when you multiply by 1/3, you're just dividing by 3. Another problem, and two new things to think about. This time our a value is a negative sign, and our b value is odd instead of even. So, same procedure. We are going to take a negative 1 out of our negative x squared and our positive 3x. So here I always like to think backwards. Negative 1 times what will give you positive 3x? Negative 1 times negative 3x. And there's our minus 7 on the outside. So now we are ready for our generic rectangle. And this time we got fractions involved, because we're going to actually take that negative 3x and divide it by 2. So our x squared goes here. And then what I like to do is, I don't mind the fractions. I just write negative 3/2 x. Negative 3/2 x. You could write negative 1.5. You could write negative 1.5. I just like to put it over 2 because I think it's easier to multiply improper fraction versus a mixed number. So what's the outside of this generic rectangle? We got x times x, and this would be negative 3/2. Negative 3/2. Now, when we go ahead and complete the square here, negative 3/2 times negative 3/2 is positive 9/4. I'm just going 3 times 3 and 2 times 2. So that is the number that we add out here. Positive 9/4. So positive 9/4 is technically being multiplied by negative 1. So its value is negative 9/4. So the opposite of negative 9/4 is positive 9/4. All right? And let's go ahead and rewrite this. We got negative 1 times x. Now this is minus 3/2 squared. I'm going to do this in 2 steps. I got my 9/4 here. I'm going to go ahead and change my negative 7 into negative 28/4. Just because now I have bottom numbers the same, denominators the same, and I can now simplify it down. And for this final version, I'll just put the negative sign in front. And then this will be what? Negative is winning by 19/4. There's an answer that works fine. You could convert it to decimals. If you're trying to graph it, maybe the decimals would be easier to graph. I could change the 19/4 into a mixed number. What is that? 4 3/4, negative 4 3/4. But it's acceptable to have your improper fraction too. So when you get the fractions from the odd b value, one option is to just leave it as something over 2, and then you always get something over 4 when you complete the square. All right, last problem. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can get this one done on your own. Watch out for that negative sign in the a value. So what should you do here? You take the negative 4 out of the x squared. And then I always like to think backwards. Negative 4 times what will give me positive 40? Negative 4 times negative 10. It's also just 40x divided by negative 4. And then I have a space for what I'm going to put in there, and the minus 92 goes on the outside. All right, generic rectangle setup. X squared here, and split your negative 10x. And on the outside, we have an x times x, and a negative 5, and a negative 5. So negative 5 times negative 5 gives us positive 25. That goes in the missing space in the parentheses. All right, now what is that? What is affecting the positive 25? The a value of negative 4. So remember, this is negative 4 times positive 25. That is negative 100. What's the opposite of negative 100? Positive 100. That's what goes on the outside. And from there, we've done all the hard work. Now we're ready to just simplify into negative 4 times x minus 5 squared plus 8. So there you go. That's how you convert to vertex form by completing the square.